Hello, everyone. Good morning. Carmen, I would just like to confirm if you can hear me and if the interpretation is happening.
Buenas noches, sí escuchamos muy bien.
Good evening. Yes, we hear well. Thank you.
Hello. Carmen, I just want to check if the interpretation for Spanish is on.
Yes, the interpretation is on. You have to select a language.
Okay.
Yes, the interpretation is on. Everyone has to select a language to be able to hear it. Thank you. Including English speakers, please.
All right. Thank you, Carmen. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning, everyone from India, and good evening to everyone else who's in Latin America, but a very early morning for the sister in Pacific. So today's session, we will be going through the advocacy plan presentation. We will be divided into two groups. There'll be one group which will comprise of sisters from Latin America, a few sisters from Africa, and Nicole from North America. And another group, we will have sisters from Asia, sisters from Africa, and also CEO from the Pacific. So we will be doing this in the later session of the class today. But to begin with, I would like Sister Orte to kindly please give us the invocation for today. Over to you, Sister Orte.
Gracias, Joy. Buenas noches.
Thank you, Joy. Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon. Today, I share this light, which represents clarity, warmth, as an element of life for all human beings through this candle. I'd like to share with you that from the Maya people from Guatemala, we are in a transition, in a time transition right now. It lasts 5 days. We're closing a cycle, and we'd like to share this with you. Thanking for everything that happened over these 365 days. We're also preparing ourselves to receive a new phase, a new time. This period of time of 5 days invites us to reflect and to look back, to look at our present time, and also to see what we would like for the future. Our grandfathers and grandmothers left us in our lives the value of time. This is why today I share with you this reflection. And today, tonight, when we are about to end the day, the energy from today is the anil, which means the seed. It's our nourishment, the maize that or corn that we consume here in Guatemala as one of our main sources of nourishment, which was given to us also by our grandfathers and grandmothers.
Nuestra alimentación, tuvieron que
To
experimentar
know what the basis of our food would be, they had to experiment and discover those that food, and that in itself is a good reason to be grateful for. So we share the value of life today. The fact that today we are joining our thoughts, our words in this framework in the process of the 10th edition of the Indigenous Women Global Leadership School. It's a process where we ask for a lot of clarity, a lot of strength, a lot of boldness to face our own daily work and activities. So we open up to the exchange of experiences and thoughts,
cambios, para buscar cambios,
preparing ourselves also to seek change within our spaces and both qualitative and changes of quality and quantity. So today we will end this evening thanking the one who gives us life, to the Creator for allowing us to have this day. And for our sisters who are starting the day, or others who are in the middle, well, the same thought for the thoughts for them. So I embrace you all today and invite you to open up our hearts so that everything that we share during these hours that we're going to be together, we can do it with our hearts. And so that we can also give the steps that we need to give together to defend our rights as women, as Indigenous peoples, and also to discover and strengthen what each one of us has as a life mission. Let's value and respect and love everything that we are going to do and share, and ask our grandfathers and grandmothers to give us light in this path today and in all the sessions that we have ahead of us. Thank you very much. Good evening. And I give the floor back to Joy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sister Orte. That was really beautiful, and thank you for opening up and setting the tone for the entire session today. So moving forward, like I mentioned earlier, we will be going into groups to discuss about our advocacy plans. But before that, I would just like to remind you about the advocacy plan. I think perhaps, not perhaps, but actually all of you had submitted a proposal for the advocacy plan during your time of application to the school. Some of these advocacy plans are complete, but some of them still needs some kind of fine tuning the plan in terms of setting the activities and redefining objectives and strategies to implement them in the field. This has been a practice by FEMI in all the 9th edition of the school, to carry forward these activities with our communities. Usually these plans are funded by FEMI at the end of the school, and you get a time from June to about December to implement these plans. However, there could be some plans that may not be implemented or may not be funded by FEMI. But from the school, we usually send your advocacy plans to our other funding agencies to help support your advocacy plans. So I think so. This is a very important part of the entire school, and this is why we are beginning the school with an introduction to the advocacy plans, so that we will have it ready by the time we present them in May. On the first day, I also mentioned that we will be having previous students of the school who will come and help us comment on advocacy plans. So that will happen in May, but the academic advisors will require for you to complete these plans way ahead of time, because we would like to have a lot of time to review them, to review your drafts, and to send it back to you for any comments or any feedback. And in the process, we will also be having something known as individual conferences, wherein an academic advisor will have a one-to-one interaction with you through Zoom or through whichever medium that you decide with her to discuss your plans individually, not just today, but the communication will continue throughout the session until we present the plan. So what we will need for the advocacy plan is a write-up that you've shared during your application, a budget plan for the same, and also a PPT. So we will have to keep this in mind. This is a lot of work, and but we're starting. We are on time, so we do not have to worry about that. Um, so I think we'll break into groups now, into two groups, and we'll come back. We'll have this discussion for about 20 minutes, 20 minutes, and then we'll come back after we all get back together to the main room. We will then present our findings on, not our findings, but our discussion points. Our discussion points. So kindly please nominate one of the sisters from your group to present this in the main room. And since today we will be having just two groups, so I think we will have about 8 minutes, 5 to 8 minutes for each group to present, and then Sister Audrey will then consolidate all of these points, and she'll give us a presentation on the advocacy plan. Thank you so much, everyone. And do you have any questions before we go to the groups? Okay. So, Pavia, over to you.
Buenas noches. Vamos a dividir los grupos.
Good evening. We're now going to divide the groups. The main room will be where the Spanish speakers will be, so that they can use interpretation. And then the second group will be only English speaking, an English speaking group. So we're going to assign some of you to a group, and the rest will remain here. That'll be the other group.
Listo, Hortensia, si quiere empezar.
Hortensia, the groups are ready if you'd like to start. Thank you, Javier. Good evening, dear leaders, women leaders. So those of us who who speak Spanish are here. It's a pleasure to know you, to meet you. We know our names, but today we have our first gathering as Latin American region. Before moving on to the analysis, we need a lot of participation, a lot of spontaneity, because we're going to first choose, or maybe perhaps there's a volunteer who can then present our ideas to the main group later on. So welcome, and it's a pleasure to see all of you. Jonetti, nice to see you. So I also invite you to please turn on your monitors, your cameras, so that we can see your faces and we can have this brief exchange. I only see Jonetti. Please, everyone else can turn their cameras on. I think we're missing Elizabeth. Medalith, Citlali, and Jonetti. I see the three of you. Bridani, you're here. And we also need Elizabeth. Juliana, I hope she's here somewhere. And Bridani, thank you for turning on your cameras. So For the Latin American group, we need a volunteer.
Gracias, Juliana,
Thank you, Juliana.
para que pueda llevar nuestras ideas en
To
plenaria.
present our ideas at the plenary in the main room later on. Do we have a volunteer?
Hoy no tenemos voluntarias, así
We don't have volunteers today, so
voy a asignar,
I am going to assign,
voy a pedir el favor,
or rather
a
ask as a favor.
Lucía.
Let's see, who's going to be Lucia?
Lucía, creo
Who's
que
going to be
está
Lucia?
conectando.
I think is
Para
here
que
with
me
us.
diga, por favor, para
So
que
can you
presente
please tell
a
me
nuestra
if
vocera en plenaria.
so that you can help me
Lucía, ¿quién está
choose
por aquí?
the person who is going to share our comments.
Bien,
Lucia says, good evening, sisters. Thank you for being here with us. It's a pleasure to be with you. Welcome, everyone. Hello from Chiapas, Mexico. My name is Lucia Gomez. I participated with the previous generation, and I'm pleased to be here learning and sharing experiences. But I see, let me see. So who can be a volunteer for this presentation? We have Citlali, Doneri. So
gracias.
Citlali, can you be our
Entonces, Citlali, por favor,
a speaker
hacemos la presentación
person?
plenaria.
Can you please be our speaker when we go back to the main room?
Estamos un poco tímidas todavía.
I see that we're all a little bit shy.
La conversación,
So,
vamos
to
a
get the
hablar
conversation
del tema de hoy
going,
es la incidencia política.
we know that today our
Lidereses,
our topic is going to be advocacy.
Yeah. So would you?
I haven't met anybody before. You guys are all new people to me.
Same.
We have Pema, Regina. Pema is from Nepal. Regina, why don't you all just go ahead and introduce yourselves for a quick, 30 seconds, and then we'll begin.
Okay, I'll start. So just to rehash, I'm Shaban, but you can call me Bon, and I'm participating. I'm representing, I guess, the Pacific, and I'm from the island of Guam, and my indigenous language is Chamorro. And I work currently for this project. I'll be focusing on water advocacy specifically.
I'm Nicole. I'm from New Mexico, United States. And I'm going to primarily focus on maternal health and reproductive justice.
Tashitile, everyone. I'm Pema Wang Mulama. I'm from and I'm representing National Indigenous to Sabah. I belong to Mugun Indigenous. And for my advocacy plan, I'll be focusing on impact on health of Indigenous climate change. Thank you, and nice to meet you all again.
Irma?
Everyone. Sorry. You want to go first, Irma? Okay, I'll just briefly introduce myself. I'm Richa Pradhan from Nepal, and I'm associated with Network of Indigenous Women in Asia. And for advocacy plan, I'm more focused on climate change impact on Indigenous women. Thank you.
Maria, I think we have you in the wrong group. I'm really sorry. I'll just Maria and transfer you to the main group. Others, please carry on with your discussion. I'll just arrange this for Maria.
Doris?
Yes, good morning. Sorry I was late. Um, I'm from Tabtaba, and I am the Upakat focal point there at the moment. My I am assigned to help indigenous peoples here in the Philippines bring their voices to the national level to be able to bring their issues there, especially there in Mindanao, where there is conflict there at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Irene?
Hello all, good evening, good morning. My name is Irene Nanyeye. I'm from Kenya. My indigenous language is Maasai. My advocacy plan had written about teenage pregnancies, but I thought of changing it to climate change. Maybe Joy will guide me on this. Yeah, thank you.
Hello,
Maria?
hello everyone. My name is Maria Lextoya from northern part of Kenya. I work for African Indigenous Women Organization. I belong to the Samburu Indigenous community, and my indigenous language is Samburu. Yeah, my advocacy plan will focus on strengthening rural indigenous women's and girls' rights, including land rights. Thank you.
Did everybody introduce themselves? Am I missing anybody?
Okay, I think let's begin our discussions. Thank you so much, everyone, for your introduction. So I'll just put a question, and perhaps you can all contribute to it. So, what do you think is an advocacy plan, and what typically involves an advocacy plan? What would be the steps of formulating one? So, over to you.
So the first question was, what do you think is an advocacy plan? Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. I'll just also type it in the chat.
Doris?
Hi. I think an advocacy plan is lobbying. It involves lobbying. It is lobbying for an issue or a campaign that you are most concerned about, and it involves bringing together a community or a group wherein you get to talk about the issue, and then you get to plan about it, how to help influence key actors, key stakeholders, so that you be united in that plan, and then you bring it to the concerned officials or actors so that it be solved. Thank you.
Richa, please go ahead.
Okay, so like you've asked, typical strategies that makes the advocacy plan. I think advocacy plan should be well defined in sense of having what is the objective of your advocacy plan? What are you trying to approach? I mean, which issues and which aspect of the issue, and also it has to be have defined stakeholders who you will be reaching out, or your allies have to be defined, who's going to support, and uh, I think those are the things that have to be there, and also how you will be doing has to be defined, through which medium, and through you know methodology of how it is going to be implemented also has to be defined. Yeah. Stakeholders are like, who are they? Like, stakeholders could be, well, are you trying to approach to the government ministries, or are you trying to approach UN mechanisms or civil societies or media? I think those kind of things need to be defined in the advocacy plan. And what kind of tools are you going to use for specific intervention?
Pema, please go ahead.
So yeah, for me, I think advocacy plan should be smart, like it should be measurable, it should be specific, and it should also be oriented to interest of community that we are targeting, especially in terms of our advocacy plan, because we are planning our advocacy plan based on informed advocacy plan of team in with the interest of the community that we are targeting.
Um, Anyone else? Perhaps you would like to add a few more points to question number 1. Right. Nicole, anything from your end?
What is an advocacy plan?
Okay, I think
What was shared? Yeah.
Yes, please go ahead. Have you ever implemented an advocacy plan before? Any of you? Have you ever proposed one? Have you ever been funded for one?
I'll share.
Perfect.
Um, so with our right now with the organization that I'm focusing my advocacy plan is called Protect Guam Water, and well, I didn't kind of formulate the organization in helping organize like our advocacy plan. Um, it's a lot of we've had to we are currently and continually strategizing to stop the construction of a firing range over Guam's primary source of water. And so with our advocacy plan, a lot of it was like identifying the main issue or the most pressing issue, and then building and ensuring that our like objective was really clear, because there's a lot of ways to address militarization and protecting our main water source. But currently with Protect One Water, in the formation of it, our goal was to have a really clear objective, because for example, there's a lot of groups on Guam where like opposing militarization is the main goal, but that is a very like broad and wide stroke, and it can kind of be difficult to push for demilitarization on Guam because there's just so much involved and there's so many different projects that they're doing in Guam. So for example, when we were dreaming up what the advocacy plans for Protect Guam Water would be, we knew that one, we had a time constraint. We have like sort of a year before they start operating the firing range on top of our water source. And so for us, planning was we have to have a really clear objective. And right now ours is educating the public about the risk of contamination to our main water source and kind of narrowing down, okay, like what is our going to be our like main, I guess, clear objective that's going to kind of guide us towards addressing this issue. Because I think something that at least I've learned in organizing with Protect One Water is that there's a lot of ways to address the many different like human rights issues that come with militarization, but narrowing it down to having a very clear objective has kind of definitely made for a more effective uh, education awareness and also more successful like change within the community. So like so for example, like when we started Protect All Water, we had like a very clear objective to educate the community about like the water risk. And part of that advocacy plan was pushing for a bill that would hope to like pause construction. Sorry, I don't want to like take too much time, but in terms of building an advocacy plan, narrowing down and being highly specific and working under kind of a time frame to achieve your goals has been really helpful. And I know that there's like a bunch of different models for making advocacy plans, but the most basic one, I think it's called like SMART plus C. But it's if you have something specific, measurable, achievable, relevant to your mission, and timed, which is like the letters in the word SMART, that kind of helps make your advocacy plan like achievable, or it kind of helped us kind of define our goals and then our strategies for achieving that goal. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
That's perfect. I think you've covered basically all the important steps, Bon. So thank you so much. And everyone, I can see most of you have not made an advocacy plan before, and I'm really sorry, because when I read your applications and I saw your advocacy plan, it seemed to me that many of you have done it before, but that's all right. So very impressed with the applications, but we'll just go through from just adding to what Bon said, and also what Pema had said about a SMART. So an advocacy plan basically is a plan of intervention that you would like to carry on or carry forward with your indigenous communities, in coordination, let's say, with other stakeholders involving other indigenous peoples organization, or even the government perhaps. So in terms of the advocacy plan with the school right now, this is a short-term advocacy plan You will have just about 6 months to complete your entire implementation, and then there'll be a reporting phase as well. So if you plan your advocacy plan for this, it has to be something that's within this time period. So this time, like Bon mentioned, the time period is also a very important thing. To begin your advocacy plan, you have to have a clear objective. So in terms of if you've not identifying a problem, you cannot have a plan of intervention without understanding the needs of your community. So having worked with your organizations and being in the field, I am sure that you are aware of what could be the potential requirements that you feel your communities need, your organization would like to intervene in. So the first part would be identifying a problem, and then justifying why you feel there is a need for intervention for that particular area. Um, we'll discuss this in more details in the main room, but just to summarize the breakout room, um, so you will have to identify a problem, justifying why you feel there is a need of intervention, or what is the scope of intervention in that particular area as well. And once you've had that sorted, you will then also have to have a vision, a goal of what you would like the output of your intervention to be. Like Richa and also Bon had also mentioned about how these advocacy plans can potentially inform policies in your communities. So thinking in although it'll be short term, but thinking long term in those sense, how can your advocacy plan inform policy advocacies for your governments? uh, then of course, once you have this, your objectives, your goal, you will need to identify clearly what activities you would be required to carry out in order to meet your goal. So let's say initially you will have to have, we always begin with a stakeholder consultation, a meeting with your communities, a meeting with the key concerned people in your communities to discuss your advocacy plan, to bring them on board to carry out this advocacy plan. Because like they say, collaboration can change the world, and in your advocacy plans as well, you will need the collaboration of your communities. So always beginning with a stakeholder consultation, and then maybe a capacity building program. For example, when I was an alumni of the school, I was there in 2018. So when I implemented my advocacy plan, my community did not have any knowledge about what is the free, prior, and informed consent, what is the right to self-determination. They were not even clear about the word indigenous, the term indigenous, because in India, we use the word tribal in the Indian context, which is very poorly defined. We understand the word tribal as someone who is uneducated, someone who comes from the hills, who hunts, who there's a lot of communal conflict there. But the term indigenous has a more you know a more wholesome definition to it. We are a group of people who have our own systems, who have our own belief systems, coming with knowledge and wisdom. So my advocacy plan at that time involved a lot of capacity building, a lot of awareness programs on the different the local, the national, and also the international mechanisms to advocacy and to the promotion of indigenous people's rights. So as we go along, you will also get many ideas from different experts who will be coming, and you'll realize as you make your advocacy plan that you'll always to connect your local, your national, and your international advocacy. How do you connect the three in terms of larger advocacies that you and your organization would like to do in the future? uh, so you'll be learning about the different mechanisms as we go along. So the advocacy plan, after you have the activities, then that's your phase of implementation. You'll have your activities, and the other important part is that you will also have to monitor and to kind of get feedbacks from the communities of how important they felt, the how success how um yeah, how successful or how impactful was your advocacy plan, so that you can then carry forward. Because from you you're all aware that from experience, when we work with communities, we don't just end things in 6 to 7 months, right? Even though our main activities might just happen in those particular time periods, those particular months, but it's a continuous process over the years. So receiving feedback will actually help you to continue your work. Uh, so that is what I would say. But Orte will also take us through a PPT for a better understanding. So anything from your end before we close and before we join back? Yes. Doris also explained about the stakeholders. So thank you, Doris. So we have 5 seconds. I'll see you all in the main room. Welcome back, everyone. So like we discussed, we will now be presenting our points. Let's go with the sisters from the first group. Sister Orte, if you would like to have any or one of the participants to present.
Perdón. Sí,
Sorry
para el
about that.
grupo nuestro,
Yes, for our group,
la vocera es Citlali.
our spokesperson is Citlali. So Citlali, welcome, and the floor is yours. Hello, good evening, sisters. For us, what we said was that an advocacy plan, what we were able to put together as an advocacy plan has a number of components or steps that contribute to defining a problem, defining objectives and actions, and also identifying the necessary resources for promoting a change. This is based on a particular problem that we might be wanting to resolve. And within this advocacy plan, you have to have very precise actions. You have to write down your economic and human resources that you're working with. For example, who are our allies? Who do we want to work with? And likewise, we need to define the spaces where we're going to be working and the times in which we're going to be working. Where, when, and with whom are we going to achieve our objectives? It is very important also to have a calendar, a timetable of events. Advocacy plan helps us to define steps in order to order ideas and promote change. But also in the end, I want to mention that it's important also to create follow-up models and evaluation so that we can discover whether we're really reaching our goals and objectives or not. So that's more or less our definition of an advocacy plan.
Thank you, Citlali. We will move to the second group. Nicole.
Hi, everybody. So we were able to talk about what an advocacy plan is, and basically somebody had shared that lobbying for an issue or our campaign they're most concerned about, and bringing together a community on a specific issue and stakeholders, and then bringing in front of officials. Another question was about what are the typical strategies that make the advocacy plan, One was like being really clear about who our allies are, how we will do this through which medium, specific community oriented, and then time for your advocacy plan is really important to achieve your goal. Someone brought up a wonderful SMART plus C goals that are specific and measurable to carry out your advocacy plan. And also, like we talked about the 6 months we have with this program to create a short-term advocacy plan and to have really clear objectives to identify a problem. A lot of the group members had not created an advocacy plan, including myself. And maybe I had and I didn't call it that, but this is more strategic and organized. And then just being clear about justifying a need for intervention, and having activities required to carry out to meet the goal. And then follow up at capacity building. So like how does our advocacy plan connect local, national, international folks to our issue? Yeah, that's it.
All right. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you to both the groups for your points. They're all very valid points. They're all very factual, and they're all very important in the formulation of the advocacy plans. So Sister Orte will take us through a presentation now, and we don't have the presentation in English yet. I apologize, but we will translate it for you, and we will send it to you through during the weekend. But for now, she will be presenting in Spanish, but please don't forget to switch on your interpretation for English. So over to you, Sister Orte.
Gracias, Joy.
Thank you, Joy. I'm very happy to have spent some time in our groups because that gave us the opportunity to see how much you already know about advocacy plans before we begin this process. So definitely from the International Forum of Indigenous Women, from the various experiences that we've had with women leaders, every year we learn a bit more. And so we are accumulating experiences to be able to facilitate the development of an advocacy plan. And what we're going to share here now, it includes a lot of what you've already talked about in your groups. So an advocacy plan. If we can go to the next slide, please. So we have some ideas organized here, and you will find what an advocacy plan is. It is a technical tool that has content and actions for political advocacy that seeks to transform a particular reality. It's as if we had copied literally what Lali had said. But we have these ideas, right? And perhaps some experiences also, and maybe not everyone shared their experiences, but I can tell that many of you have participated in something like an advocacy plan in the past. The really rich thing about this process is that perhaps you have participated in the past in some sort of advocacy experience, but you haven't necessarily formulated the plan. So let's look at the steps. First of all, we have to understand what is advocacy. And we have learned, and you have also, we're going to complement our ideas with different readings. But for us, advocacy is a political process. It's an organized political process aimed at influencing decision makers in order to transform policies legal frameworks, practices, ideas, and values that are currently perpetuating inequalities, prejudices, and exclusion. So you've already shared that in many ways, and we're just reaffirming that here. Advocacy strengthens the capacity of citizens, men and women, as decision makers and builds institutions of power that are more transparent and equitable. Why do we want to do political advocacy then? In order to do these things. These 2 points lead to a full exercise of human rights, individual and collective human rights. So political advocacy can be community advocacy, could be regional level or national or international level. And it's going to depend a lot on the capacity for negotiating and expressing what you are trying to achieve. And you have to identify strategic actions. But these are some of the first ideas that we want to share. If we can go to the next slide, please. We can share also, as many of you said, that there are some steps involved. And as we go to the next plan, we can talk about some of the steps. Next slide. So the structure of an advocacy plan as far as FEME is concerned is the following. It has 15 components. And you'll say, really, we have to do all of these steps? But you'll see that in practice, and as you are going step by step, you're going to realize that it's not that hard to come up with an advocacy plan. In FEME, the structure of an advocacy plan starts with an introduction, a statement of the problem, the characteristics of the target population, the justification, why, and the relevant political legal framework, whether that's national or international. Also, the identification of the agencies or organizations that we are trying to influence and what kinds of changes we're hoping for. We need to map the actors. We need to do an analysis of the organizations that are going to do the advocacy. We're going to do a SWOT evaluation. There is a proposal for possible alliances and coalitions. And then you have to move to strategies and the timetable and requirements. 13, analysis for seeing whether there's a gender focus, intergenerational, intercultural, intersectional focus. This is all very important so that our advocacy plan can contain those things. Also, there has to be a capacity building component, and finally, a follow-up plan. And so we will explain each one of these components in the next slide.
What's going to be our starting point? So if we see that there are 15 components, the starting point is going to be identifying the problem. So for all of us who've had the opportunity to write also different proposals, like be it an essay or a document of any kind, the introduction, we usually write it at the end. It's the first thing that appears on the document, but it's actually usually what we write at the end of our work when we design an advocacy plan. So the starting point is going to be identifying the problem, not the introduction, the problem that we want to change. So once we see clearly the problem that we want to solve or change, then we go to the next step, and that is the geographic characteristics of that population or that territory that we want to transform. So geographical characteristics, sociocultural features, economic features, those are the ones that we're going to be putting emphasis on to collect all of our information. Then we go to the justification or the ground as to why is it necessary to achieve those changes? Why is it important? Who benefits that change? Who benefits that change? And we have to remember that advocacy is to transform realities that affects or benefits a large group, not just for my personal interest or a very small group. Usually we seek results that are quality changes for a medium-sized group. Number 5, we see the relevant legal framework, both at the national and international levels. We know that with all of the advocacy that has been done by Indigenous peoples and Indigenous women, in each one of our countries, we have enough of a legal framework, political framework at the national level. So from all of that variety of laws that we have, let's select 3 or 4 that are more related to the problem or the topic that I'm dealing with, the one that I want to change. We're not going to we're not going to include absolutely everything, but we're going to list each one of the laws that we will choose. So that's in number 5. I lost the screen. I don't know if you can see this. Can you see the screen that's being shared? We do. Yes, okay. So the next slide, we see the next steps here. So number 6, we're also going to choose at the international level in terms of the legal framework. We also have a lot of legal framework at the international level. So we're going to select 3 or 4 that relate the most with our topic. At the international level, there are 3 that we are going to choose from the whole list. But always keeping in mind the sustainable developmental goals and the Declaration of Indigenous Peoples' Rights by the United Nations, as well as 169 and we also see in number 6 then identifying the agency. What agency is going to be our advocacy plan directed to? So we talk about institutions, be it public, mostly they're public because we define all public policies, programs, and projects from there, including also how the budget is distributed. In number 7, we'll define our objectives and expected changes. From that problem that we identified in number 2, we're going to get to develop our objectives and write down our objectives and the changes that we expect. When we do that, we want to add to that process of change that we seek. We're not going to solve the entire problem. So let's not be frustrated or stress out, because an advocacy plan will nevertheless help contribute to that change. We need to be realistic. Sometimes we get very excited with the fact that they're going to support us, that they're going to help us with the implementation of an advocacy plan. If we want to change, a historical problem with an advocacy plan that will last only a few months. So we need to be realistic, dear women leaders. We have to measure our abilities, our skills, our capabilities against that problem. It is a problem that we're going to contribute to changing. And if we are going to achieve those changes, we need to make a map of the actors. That means, and that's in the format, and we're going to explain it further later on, but we need to identify who are our partners, our allies, those against us, and those who are indecisive. So we need to do that so that we can focus our work towards perhaps convincing those that don't support us. So it's important to know, well, the map of actors that we're going to be facing. Also, we need to see how our group is. We need to look at ourselves internally, look at our organization through the SWOT analysis by looking at our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, and the threats. Why? Because as we typically say, to convince those actors, we need to identify the strategies we're going to use to do that. And that's why we need to also have our proposals for possible partnerships or alliances. Who of those actors can become my allies? So those possible alliances need to be defined from the formulation phase of our advocacy plan. So let's not try to do it all alone. Changes don't happen just because we're going to do this alone, but together, it will be together with my organization. That's why we need to identify clearly who the actors are, who our allies are. The next slide includes then the strategy that we're going to follow for our advocacy plan. What are those strategies? It could be a press release, it could be a training, it could be a mass campaign, information campaign. So it could be one of those, and those strategies need to be included in your advocacy plan. And again, because of the results that we've had over the last few years, what happens is that often we think that with that advocacy plan, we're going to change the world. Well, we need to be realistic and put those strategies in context. Because a strategy that may work in Peru perhaps could work in Guatemala, but the context is nevertheless going to be different. So we have to find clarity and know those differences. You also need a timeline and to know what the requirements are. We also talk about resources and about budgeting, as you well said. And we need to follow the work as we've planned. So that's why we usually have a timeline. And as I say again, advocacy is done in the territory. My timeline as a participant in the Indigenous Women Global Leadership School is not necessarily the same timeline for the organizations in the territory. So let's look at that very carefully, please, so that we don't propose plans that we're not going to be able to respond from our realities, or that we're not going to be able to obtain results with, or the expected results. Then number 13 includes an analysis with a gender focus. This is always very important. In other spaces, in terms of the focus on gender, it seems like this is work only for women. But here we're saying that we need to include the cosmovision by all of the both men and women, included in our communities, need to be included here as well. And then we need a plan to develop the group skills. It could be that the advocacy plan has started already, but this plan can help complement that process that is already started. So what is the capability of my group? What do I have? What things do I have that I can use to continue with this advocacy plan or to go beyond? So if we finished in November of this year, we were not able to achieve the change that we wanted. What skills does my group have to continue working with the advocacy plan that has started? That's why we also need a follow-up plan. When the advocacy plan ends, is that the end for everything? Well, we have to see what we're going to do. So am I going to leave just because I finished my advocacy plan? It doesn't work like that, my dear sisters. We have to have a follow-up plan after we complete the implementation of our advocacy plan. Next slide, please. Here we share some strategies for advocacy. So we have training or of leadership training with commitment. Just like you came to this program with the support of organizations. However, when we go to implement our advocacy plans, sometimes it's very difficult to respond to that commitment, that leadership. So we need to organize young women together with other movements. It's possible that so perhaps we have women who are committed, but they're not organized. And organizing them is a type of strategy. Also, research before we move on to the action so that we can see what's there. Another one would be to carry out political communication to find out what are the most efficient ways to communicate. I remember that we once have a participant, and in her initial advocacy plan had included press releases, flyers, and I would tell her, in the territory, that doesn't work because perhaps community radio works better. Town halls. So we need to work better. So we need to make sure we use the appropriate context and strategies that are appropriate for our context. Then also, we need to create alliances and partnerships, strategic partnerships, because by itself, one organization cannot achieve that much unless it has a very strong leadership and strong trajectory. We also need to inform, feedback, and disseminate information, and to create mechanisms for organized participation. Also, mobilize social support. Sometimes we need to carry out an action where we can can do and where we can work with 1 or 2 people, but sometimes we need more than that. We also need to plan the advocacy with monitoring and evaluation. We also need to prepare our political documents. That's a tool, because sometimes I talk 10 minutes. Sometimes I spend 10 minutes talking about just who I am, and we don't use time appropriately because we don't see what the political information really is. We miss the opportunity to include the most important part, which is really the political information. So we also need to keep in mind press releases and public statements as additional tools or strategies. Among the techniques, we have analysis of possible scenarios where we evaluate where and when and who makes decisions. Sometimes we need to know who makes the decision, because it's not always the governor or the person that we think might make all decisions, because they may not make them all. So we need to know exactly who does that. We also need to make an analysis of and create a map of actors to see who makes the decisions, who participate. And then the SWOT analysis, as you already know, is identifying our strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, and challenges. Lobbying by actors, that's also very important. Sometimes we obtain better results over those famous popular coffees that we have during lobbying, or just speaking in the hallways to convince others. Negotiation, because it's very important to know what we're asking for and what we offer. Sometimes we need to give up something to obtain something else towards that change, as well as conversations with the authorities to present to them what the problem and the situation is. There are others that we will identify along the way, but what we need to do is to complement our experiences and our time with everything else that we can come up with. Something that I want to highlight from this presentation, from this document, is that an advocacy plan can help a process that has already started. So we need to start from that reality. We cannot make changes by ourselves. By myself, Hortensia, I'm not going to be able to achieve all those changes. I need support. So that is why you, as women leaders, you already have those spaces available and open to you from your organizations. And we need to be realistic. That's the other thing, because sometimes we end up being guided by emotions and excitement, and we forget other aspects, such as our budget, for example. So we need to be mindful of the funding that we receive for those projects and plan accordingly. We also need to define the results and how far we really wish to go. So when you give that first step, remember that we cannot change a historical problem with an advocacy plan that will last only 4 or 5 months. And that is the difference. So let's see an advocacy plan as a project. And when you prepare your budget, as you will see, we're not going to have enough budget to equip an entire office, only for some activities, some actions that are very strategic. That's what we want to leave very clear, so that we can design well our advocacy plan. And each advisor will do her job accompanying each one of you, so that you don't feel alone in this process. As we say, this exercise can change. The actions themselves don't change, but the scenario perhaps could change over months. So if I identify a problem because of the advocacy by the organizations, that if it's something that they were already able to achieve changes in, I can still contribute towards that, towards improving that situation. You just will need the approval of your advisor for proceeding. This structure that we worked out from FIMI is pretty simple. We don't want to make your assistance too complicated, too difficult. We would like to simplify this work. We know the majority of you work. You come from organizations, so if it complements your work, terrific. But we know that you're going to find a way to complement the knowledge that you're going to acquire over these months with the practical section that we will have towards the end of these sessions. So thank you so much for listening. We hope to have been able to share a lot of information. We know that everything will become more clear as we move along and continue to exchange ideas over the sessions. Thank you, Joy. And we're here for all of you, remember that. But Joy, you can continue. I give you the floor. Joy?
Puedes continuar con las sesión, con las preguntas y respuestas, hermana.
Do we continue with the questions and answers, sister? Then, now, thank you, Lucia. Are there any questions, reactions? There's a lot of different, there are a lot of different components. If you have questions, please, you can ask at this time. Or what do you think of the structure? Okay, since no one is asking right now, I will repeat perhaps to see if any of you has any questions. Someone from Latin America? So we can identify little by little. Today, we don't want to call people by name, but in the next sessions, I think that that's what we're going to do. We're going to ask questions to specific people. Today, we're going to be very democratic. Who would like to share? Okay, let's see if you're there. Let's turn your screen, let's turn your cameras on. I'd like to know if you're there because I only see names, so I'd like to see all of your faces. Cameras on, please. Thank you, Lucia. I just want to make sure that everyone is here. Nicole, thank you. Thank you. It's so nice to see you and to meet some of you. Elizabeth, thank you. Also, the presentation of a structure on a very first session, I know is not enough and there will be a lot of questions, but thank you for turning your cameras on. And now we're gonna let Medalith share her thoughts. Medalith says that the information is actually quite clear, but what I would like to know as a participant I am young. I don't have the experience that many of my colleagues may have here. I would like to hear if you can tell us what advocacy plans you were able to complete, because the information that we've seen has been more theoretical, right? So I would like to know how the work has actually been done, what difficulties you've encountered, what strengths you have seen, because some of us are still quite young and we have not yet been in those situations. So just to see if you could share with us some advocacy plans, the experience with some of those. Before I answer, I'd like to hear from Elizabeth and then Regina. Hello, good evening, dear sisters. I'm here in Mexico. It is 9 p.m. Yeah, she says I got a little bit confused with the schedules, with the schedule, but I want to thank our sister Hortensia for explaining everything to us and coordinating information through WhatsApp. And I know that all of this coordination is probably difficult, but I'd like to ask if the proposals that we've already made, if that's what we're going to continue to fine tune, and this is what we're going to be working with. And in terms of all of the methodology that you've been giving us, are we also going to have the opportunity to incorporate some perspectives that we have from our organizations or the experience that we've had? So it would be important to know that. I am preparing an advocacy plan, but it's not a personal advocacy plan, but from all of our colleagues from Indigenous women lawyers in Mexico. And we are working on collective advocacy that I will be presenting through this global school, because I think is going to be important for all of us. So if that's allowable, that's what I will be doing. I also wanted to see about the mechanism that we're going to be following for advising our colleagues. Will we have separate meetings with them? So I'd like to know about that, because it's going, I know that once we need to write things down, it's difficult. We find, to be concise when we write all of this. Sometimes we want to talk about a lot of things. So we need to land with the appropriate information, and also as soon as possible, because the school is not that long. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Juliana. Regina, go ahead. Regina, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. My question is, how to make sure when you making your advocacy plan, we won't be trapped on a activity-based plan, but more on a result-based plan. Because usually when we make an advocacy plan, we usually like trap on thinking about activities, but not focusing on the results. So is there any strategy on how to make your advocacy plan more on result-based than activity-based? Thank you.
Gracias. Vamos a escuchar a Doris Esteban.
Thank you. Let's listen to Doris, and then I'll respond to some of these.
Hi, I would just like to share that here in the Philippines, under Tebteba, we have this Upakat network of indigenous peoples, and here in the Philippines. So we are about to make a proposal because they're in Mindanao, we have this kind of regional government there that is more specific to the peoples there, because it is a mix of peoples there. We have Muslims, Christians, non-Muslim immigrants, and then also indigenous peoples who are called specifically non-Moro indigenous peoples. So now the non-Moro indigenous peoples, because of that new development of a government there, they feel that their rights and their needs are not being addressed. So now what we are planning to do, I will be helping them there to make this indigenous peoples code that they will be formulating by themselves, and then they will be forwarding it to the government there for hopefully to be acknowledged and then to be adopted and then implemented there, so that their rights and needs will be addressed. And then it is also a kind of a code that will be that is self-determined. So I think that is one example of kind of advocacy plan that we are planning to make here. I just want to share that. Thank you.
Gracias, Doris. Bueno.
Thank you, Doris. Well, I can start to respond to some of these questions. First of all, we start with the reality that you are already leaders and that you have already done some political advocacy, or you're in the process of thinking about it and doing it. And we want to complement some of the information that you have. So punctuality is a super important thing in political advocacy. If you're looking for a hearing, for example, or a meeting with a particular person who's a decision maker, the meeting is at 7 in the morning, and you should really get there a half an hour early. So what you can do is to observe what's happening there by getting there early. And probably when you think about people who work in the political sphere, if we arrive 5 minutes late, we may actually miss the whole meeting and lose our opportunity to make a presentation. So I just put that out as an example. So for political advocacy, punctuality is extremely important. But this doesn't respond to your questions still. And Elizabeth, thank you for being here today. And Regina, I think, was saying, how are we going to focus more on results? When you are writing your objectives, these results need to be coherent with the objectives and the activities. Often we're thinking about our objectives on one hand, and our results we think are going to be very huge or very extreme. But what results do we really want to obtain, or do we think we can obtain? We're not going to be able to make all of the changes that generally we would like to be able to see. So our objectives have to be very focused and be in accordance and to be consistent with the results that we're trying to reach. So what are the obstacles sometimes we have in this process? Sometimes when we write our advocacy plan, we get excited and we say, oh, we're going to solve the whole problems of the world with this advocacy plan. And so that's why we always emphasize that we have to really take note of our capacity as of an organization and how far we might be able to go. Almost all advocacy processes can be something that is worked on in phases, for example, but we have to identify what phase are we on. And among the difficulties that we might mention, and as you've said, we're always working with the communities, right? Our agendas are never going to be exactly the same. Our priorities are not going to be the same, but if the organizations have an agenda that's clearly defined, let's go with what they have identified. Or if we've identified something that's not a part of the priority of our organizations in the community, that's going to be harder. That will give us some headaches. So we have to look at the problems that we're trying to solve in very carefully. And when you applied for this process, maybe you had in mind an advocacy plan, but the question is, can we change that? And the answer is, well, we don't want you to change it entirely, but you might have to change the results that you can expect to reach with that advocacy plan. And we'll be looking at those things along the way. Also, the strategies for promoting the rights of Indigenous peoples, as I believe Doris mentioned, in Article 3 of the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, we talk very clearly about self-determination. And many of our countries have ratified that declaration. But if we don't know the content of that declaration, then we can't use it, and it becomes a limitation. Joy, did you want to say something? I think I saw your hand up.
Yes. Thank you, Sister Orte. And my apologies, I had an emergency, and so I just had to attend to that, but I'm back now. I'm really sorry. So just answering to the questions, trying to answer to the questions that you've asked. I think Elizabeth asked about if we will be having any kind of follow-up from the academic advisors, right? So I would just like to say that, yes, we will be having something known as individual conferences, wherein your academic advisors will individually work on the advocacy plan with you, because sometimes, here we're discussing the general steps to formulate the advocacy plans, but your advocacy plans will be very different from one another, depending on the needs of your community, and also the resources of your organizations. So I just want to say that, yes, there will be individual follow-ups with your academic advisors through whichever medium you decide, be it through Zoom calls or WhatsApp, or maybe even if even if we're in the same place, we can even meet. But yes, so I hope that answers, Elizabeth. Then Regina, I think you had asked about how to make your advocacy plan more result-based instead of activity-based, right? So just adding to what Sister Orte had said, at the heart of every successful advocacy plan from experiences is that, the more successful advocacy plans, the most impactful advocacy plans have always been the ones where communities have been involved from the very start. So just always working with the communities, making them feel, not force feeding them anything. Sometimes we have this notion of going to the communities, and we have our own deliverables, right? Our own objectives. So like Sister Orte said, we have to not be biased that way. We have to go with the intention of being there with them, and also implementing our advocacy plan as per the requirements of the community. Also, another very important lesson that we've learned through the advocacy plans is the involvement of allied organizations. So perhaps our organizations may not always have the complete resources. We may not always have the full checklist of making things happen. So coordination with allied organizations, because lobbying advocacy is a very continuous process. We cannot expect change from our short-term implementation of our advocacy plans, but just thinking long-term of how your advocacy plans can carry forward with our partner organizations as well. So I think that way you will be able to achieve the results through coordination and through community participation. I hope that's I know I'm not really answering, but these are just lessons learned from previous implementation. And Doris, I don't quite remember your question. I'm sorry if you can repeat, but I think Sister Orte had answered that for you.
Sorry, it was not a question. I was given an example of how we were gonna formulate an advocacy plan here for the organization, but it was not what I was planning.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, thank you, Doris. Okay. So, any other questions or comments, or just adding on to what we've said? Any thoughts that you would like to share? Over to you, Sister Orte.
Gracias, Joy.
Thank you, Joy. So when we talk about obstacles, I didn't tell you ahead of time, but I didn't tell Lucia ahead of time, but since she's here, I'm going to invite her to share a little bit about her experience. Lucia, could you share a little bit about the experience of the obstacles that you faced? Because often we think, oh boy, what obstacles are we going to run into on the way? Maybe Lucia can share a little bit about her experience.
Gracias, muchas gracias, hermana.
Thank you,
Bienvenida.
sister.
¿Se me escuchan bien?
Can you hear me all right?
Sí. Ok, muchas gracias.
All right, thank you.
Gracias. Soy Lucía Gómez, aquí de Chiapas.
My name
México.
is
Yo
Lucia
soy
Gomez. I'm
Maya
from
Sotil.
Mexico. I'm Maya Sotzil.
Fui participante de en la novena edición de la Escuela
And
Global.
I participated in the 9th edition of the Global School.
Okay. Y nuestro plan de incidencia que trabajamos.
The advocacy plan that we worked on, that we developed here in the school,
Mujeres indígenas
had
anticorrupción.
to do with Indigenous women against corruption.
Plan,
And the way we
primeramente
developed the
fue
plan in the first place,
realizar un diagnóstico en la comunidad.
we did a whole assessment in the community.
Ver primero las necesidades,
And we
los
surveyed
deseos, los
the
anhelos
needs,
de
the
las
desires
mujeres,
of
y
the
cómo,
women in the communities.
con base a esto,
And based on that,
desarrollar el plan.
we carried out
Fue
a plan.
así que desarrollamos este plan Mujeres Indígenas Anticorrupción.
And the plan was
Con la
Indigenous
asesoría
women
de
against
la hermana
corruption,
Hortensia,
and with the
desarrollamos.
advising of Sister Hortensia.
Primero fue
The
realizar el
first thing,
diagnóstico, identificar
as I
las
said,
principales necesidades de
we did
nuestras
was
comunidades,
the assessment to identify the primary
identificando
needs of our
actores
community.
que puedan apoyarnos en el desarrollo de
And
nuestro
then we
plan y
also
que
identified what kind of allies might be able to help us develop
efectivo al
our
momento
plan.
de implementar en las comunidades.
to help the communities.
Eso es lo breve que les puedo comentar en nuestro proceso de formulación del plan de
That's what I can say briefly about how we formulated the plan. Thank you. And as Joy also said, how effective have the advocacy plans been in the past? One of our participants, I think she was in the 8th year of the global school, she was able to do a big write-up on the whole process, a systematic write-up. And last year, they were people that wanted to support her on this follow-up to the plan. At first, it was so hard for her, but I think we need to dare to go to various institutions. Government institutions have responsibilities, they have commitments, but often they don't fulfill their commitments. And as Indigenous women, often we are not seen as political actors. They don't see us as leaders. They see us always in some service role only. And so I said, we need to write newspaper articles, we need to sign statements, and so we've did all of these things, but we worked with Lisette step by step, and the exercise was very detailed, but at the end, she had good results with important allies in her community. And FEMI gave her the opportunity to work on it again. So it really depends a lot on the leadership and the capacity to make strategic alliances in your community. Some of the actions that you end up doing are perhaps not going to be part of your initial timetable, because in real time, different things come up. So it's important that each one of you know the territory very well where you're trying to do your advocacy. Knowing your territory means I know what problems people are facing. I've already mapped out the actors. It's not going to be hard because I know who makes decisions here. I know who you need to meet with and who you need to have conversations with. All of this is part of advocacy. And the important thing is to exercise that leadership that we have. Now, some of you have said that you're very young, but you know what? Sometimes youth are told that you don't have experience, or that you're not leaders, or that you're young women or girls. That's, a problem for young women sometimes. And what the advocacy plan and what this course will help you with is to develop some confidence in yourself. You already have some good experience you can take advantage of to do your advocacy plans. And often advocacy plans are going to be implemented in our own communities. And they say, no one is a prophet in their hometown sometime. But since you've already made the decision that you want to do this, and that you know your community, and you want to strengthen your community, and you want to strengthen your community organizations, this space is going to be a good space for you. FEMI has been doing this worldwide training program for some time now. And the community experience is something that we want to take to the Permanent Forum of Indigenous Women at the UN to share those experiences. And so, because these problems that we're trying to resolve, we want our plans to be in our communities, to be reflected in these international spaces where often our voices are not heard. And so in the sessions of the Permanent Forum of Indigenous Women are important for sharing our experiences and being able to have our voices heard. So for us, the Declaration of the UN about the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is a fundamental declaration. The Sustainable Development Goals are another crucial document. So as you work on your advocacy plan, pick one of the Sustainable Development Goals that is related to your plan. Another mistake that I've seen often in some of these proposals is that in the last few years, a number of laws have been passed in a number of countries and in international levels. So let's take advantage of those. The recent legal framework is very important. Sometimes at the national level, we're quoting a law from 1970s, but it's out of date now, perhaps. And it's out, the context is not the same. So let's try to identify the legal framework that is recent so that it can be, so that our plan can be linked in time as well. So it's, the whole thing is a constant learning process and an exchange of experiences, and that's what we're going to have in these exchange processes we're going to have here. So thank you very much. And I don't know if Lucia has something more to say or if Joy wants to say something else. Thank you for your attention. And every session, we will be exchanging our information and experiences a little bit more to strengthen us.
Thank you, Sister Orte. Thank you for a very, very comprehensive presentation. You've answered all the questions that the sisters have. I hope we have been able to answer the questions. If we've not, please let us know, and we will support you in that. We have come to the close of our session today. But before we close, I would just like to remind you that we will be having the school's opening day this Friday. So we'll see you day after tomorrow. For Asia, it's tomorrow at 8 a.m. Guatemala time. So be there. It'll be a good program. We will have speakers from the United Nations who will be coming. We'll also be having Columbia University who will be joining us. You'll also be meeting Professor Elsa on that day. She is our main go-to person, and she heads this program from Columbia University. So she'll be in continuous touch with us. So we will be meeting her on the opening day, and as well as other organizations. We will be having a presenter from one of our partner organizations. So be there and don't miss it. It'll be a good time. It'll be a good day. So see you everyone on Friday. Thank you.
Gracias, feliz noche a todas. Felices y buenas tardes, buenos días.
Thank you. Good night and good day to everyone.